This 6-year-old girl lived with her aunt and uncle after losing her parents in a fire, but when a businessman sees her being beaten on the street, he discovers a dark secret that no one could have imagined. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Little Lily pulled once more at the long sleeve of her school uniform, trying to hide the purple marks that spread across her delicate arms. Seated at the back of the classroom, she kept her eyes down, avoiding attention. Her thin fingers nervously played with a small hole in the hem of her already worn blouse, a souvenir from one of the many falls she claimed to have whenever someone asked about her bruises. Ms. Harrison observed the girl with growing concern. In recent months, she had noticed subtle changes in her quietest students' behavior. Lily, who at least used to smile during recess, now remained isolated, refusing to play with the other children. Her academic performance, previously average, had plummeted. The girl always seemed tired, with dark circles under her eyes, unusual for a child of just 6 years old. When the bell rang, announcing the end of classes, Lily didn't move immediately. Like the other children, she waited for everyone to leave before putting away her materials with calculated slowness. Ms. Harrison noticed that she hadn't touched the lunch her aunt supposedly prepared every morning. In fact, it had been days since she'd seen the girl eat anything during break time. "Lily, sweetie, can we talk for a bit?" Ms. Harrison called softly, approaching the student's desk. The girl raised her almond-shaped eyes, an almost imperceptible scar near her left temple catching the afternoon light. For a brief moment, Ms. Harrison saw a flash of fear pass through that gaze, so young, yet already so burdened. "I need to go. Aunt Sarah doesn't like when I'm late," Lily murmured, her voice so low it could barely be heard. "It'll be quick. I promise. I'm worried about you. Have you been eating properly, sleeping well?" Lily nodded mechanically, the rehearsed movement of someone who had given the same answer many times. Her small hands continued pulling at her uniform sleeves, a nervous tick that Ms. Harrison had noticed intensifying in recent weeks. "You know you can trust me, right? If something's bothering you, anything." "Everything's fine, Ms. Harrison. I really need to go," Lily responded, rising abruptly. In her hurry, her backpack fell, scattering some notebooks on the floor. Ms. Harrison bent down to help gather the materials and noticed something that made her heart sink. In one of the open notebooks, several dark drawings furiously scribbled, shadowy figures surrounding a small silhouette, all made with black pencil pressed so intensely that it had torn the paper in places. Before she could say anything, Lily snatched the notebook from her hands, stuffing it haphazardly into her backpack along with her other supplies. Her hands were visibly shaking now. "I'm sorry, Ms. Harrison. I can't be late," she repeated, running out of the classroom before Ms. Harrison could stop her. From the classroom window, Ms. Harrison watched as Lily crossed the schoolyard. The girl stopped abruptly upon seeing a car parked at the gate, an old model with worn paint. A tall man got out of the vehicle, his face contorted in an expression that sent an involuntary shiver down Ms. Harrison's spine. "Didn't I tell you not to keep me waiting?" Rick's gruff voice echoed across the empty yard, making Lily hunch her shoulders. "Sorry, Uncle. The teacher wanted to talk to me and—" "Just get in the car," he cut her off, opening the back door with unnecessary force. Ms. Harrison watched helplessly as Lily entered the vehicle, her small figure disappearing into the back seat. The car drove off with a shrill noise, leaving only a cloud of smoke and a heavy feeling in the teacher's chest. That night, while grading papers at her desk, Ms. Harrison couldn't get Lily out of her head. The disturbing drawings, the fear in her eyes, the mark she tried to hide. Something was deeply wrong, but what could she do? She had already tried to discuss her suspicions with the school administration, but without concrete evidence, nothing could be done. Sarah, Lily's aunt, always appeared at school meetings impeccably dressed, perfectly playing the role of the dedicated guardian. She spoke eloquently about how difficult it was to raise her niece after the tragedy that claimed her parents, but how she did everything out of love for the girl. Her performance was so convincing that few questioned her version of events. What no one knew was that at that exact moment, while Miss Harrison agonized in her home, Lily was huddled in her tiny room, a space that resembled more of a converted storage closet. The girl hugged her knees to her chest, trying to make herself even smaller while she listened to the raised voices coming from the living room. "That nosy teacher is asking too many questions," Rick's voice thundered. "We can't risk the kid opening her mouth." "She won't say anything," Sarah replied, her falsely sweet tone carrying a veiled threat. "She knows very well what happens to children who don't know how to keep secrets, doesn't she?" Lily squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block the memories those words brought back. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since breakfast the previous day, her current punishment for dropping a glass of water in the kitchen. On the lower floor of the house, in the small basement converted into a studio apartment, Elena tried to ignore the sounds coming from above. The 71-year-old Salvadoran woman clutched a rosary between her wrinkled fingers, murmuring prayers in her native language. She had come to America seeking a better life, but now found herself trapped in a situation that ate away at her from within. She knew what was happening to little Lily. She heard the screams, the muffled cries, the pleas. More than once she had seen the marks when the girl came down to keep her company during the day, while Sarah slept after her night shifts at the hospital and Rick left for his supposed temporary jobs. But what could she do? Her documents were irregular, and Rick made a point of reminding her of this whenever he could. One word out of place, and she would be reported, losing the little she had achieved in her life. That night, like so many others, the heavy silence that followed the raised voices was broken only by the restrained crying of a child who had known cruelty too early. And, at two different points in that house, two people struggled with their own helplessness. A teacher who couldn't prove her suspicions, and an immigrant who feared losing everything if she dared to speak. What neither of them knew was that fate was about to set in motion a series of events that would change the lives of everyone involved, beginning with a seemingly casual encounter on an ordinary street in that suburban neighborhood. Lawrence loosened his tie while driving through the streets of the suburban neighborhood, feeling his chest tighten in a way that had become familiar in recent weeks. The cardiologist had been clear. He needed to reduce stress, or his heart wouldn't hold up. But how could he do that when his development company was at a crucial moment of expansion? He parked his car on a residential street to recalibrate his GPS. He had gotten lost looking for a plot of land that Theodore, his partner, insisted would be perfect for their next development. Theodore and his obsession with accelerated growth, always pushing for bigger, riskier, more profitable projects. Not that Lawrence didn't appreciate success. He had fought too hard to get where he was, but something inside him was calling for a change of direction. His thoughts were interrupted by shouts coming from a nearby house. At first, he tried to ignore them. They were someone else's problems after all. But then he heard the unmistakable sound of a child crying. Something in that cry hit him like a punch to the stomach, awakening memories he preferred to keep buried. That's when he saw it, a small girl trying to run down the sidewalk, being caught by a tall man who grabbed her arm violently. "Haven't I warned you about trying to run away?" The man's deep voice carried a threat that made Lawrence's blood run cold. "Please, Uncle Rick, it hurts," the childish voice pleaded. But the man was already dragging the girl back to the house, pulling a belt from his waist with his free hand. "You're going to learn once and for all the price of giving me trouble," Rick snarled, raising the belt. Before he realized what he was doing, Lawrence had already gotten out of his car. "Hey! Let go of the girl!" Rick turned, surprised by the intrusion. His small eyes narrowed as he sized up the suited man approaching. "Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong," he growled, still holding Lily firmly by the arm. "I'm calling the police right now." Lawrence pulled out his cell phone, his hands trembling slightly. He wasn't a man of confrontations, but something about this scene prevented him from simply walking away. "You really think the police will listen to some stranger playing hero?" Rick laughed, a humorless sound. "I'm her legal guardian. I can discipline my niece however I see fit." "That's not discipline. It's abuse." Lawrence took another step forward, noticing how the girl was trembling. Her almond eyes were wide with fear, and something in that look transported him decades into the past. "Don't let them take me, Larry." Olivia's voice echoed in his memory, his 7-year-old little sister being torn from his arms by social workers after their parents' death. He, at just 12 years old, powerless to prevent the system from separating them. He never saw her alive again. The sound of windows opening brought Lawrence back to the present. Curious neighbors began to peek at the argument, some with phones in hand. Rick noticed the unwanted attention and released Lily's arm, though his face was still contorted with anger. All right, no need to make a scene," he said through clenched teeth. "Let's go inside, Lily. We'll talk about your behavior later." The implicit threat in the words made the girl hunch her shoulders, but she had no choice but to obey. Before entering, she cast one last look at Lawrence, a look he knew all too well, the same one his sister had when she begged for help. "This isn't over," Lawrence warned, keeping his voice firm despite his racing heart. "I'll be watching." "Are you threatening me?" Rick took a step in his direction. "Be careful, friend. You don't know who you're messing with. I have friends in interesting places, if you know what I mean." "I have my resources too," Lawrence replied, though he knew he was bluffing. "And unlike you, I have nothing to hide." Rick laughed again, that same joyless laugh. "Everyone has something to hide. I suggest you mind your own business before you find out you've messed with the wrong people." With that, he pushed Lily inside and slammed the door hard, leaving Lawrence standing on the sidewalk, his hands still shaking. Gradually, the curious neighbors closed their windows, returning to the safety of their routines, preferring to pretend they hadn't witnessed anything. Lawrence returned to his car, but couldn't start it immediately. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he tried to control his breathing. The cardiologist had warned about stressful situations, but how could he simply ignore what he had just seen? In the basement of the house, Elena had heard the entire argument. Through her small window, she saw when the suited man got into his car and sat there as if making a difficult decision. After a few minutes, he finally started the engine and left, but something told the Salvadoran woman that this wouldn't be their last encounter. Upstairs, Lily was sitting on her bed, her arms marked by Rick's grip, listening to the heated discussion between her aunt and uncle in the kitchen. Sarah's voice, normally controlled, was agitated. "We need to be more careful. We can't draw. Attention now, not when we're so close." "That meddler won't do anything," Rick replied, but there was a note of concern in his voice. "Nobody believes strangers who interfere in family matters. What if he investigates, if he discovers about the insurance, about the fire?" "Shut up," Rick cut her off. "Want the kid to hear?" Lily hugged her knees tighter. She didn't fully understand what they were talking about, but the mention of the fire always made her tremble. Sometimes, in her nightmares, she could still hear her parents' screams, smell the smoke. Her eyes fell on her small school backpack, where she kept her most prized possession, a crumpled photo of her parents, smiling on a picnic day. It was the only memento she had managed to save. Her aunt and uncle didn't know about the photo. They would have taken it from her if they knew. That night, as the house finally grew quiet, 3 people remained awake, each fighting their own demons. Lily curled up in her bed, praying that the man in the suit would return. Elena in her basement, torn between fear and conscience, and Lawrence in his penthouse on the other side of town, already on the phone with Eleanor, a private investigator who had helped his company in the past. "I need you to investigate a situation," he said, his voice betraying the urgency he felt. "It's about a child. I think she's being abused." What none of them knew was that this night would mark only the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever, unearthing long-kept secrets and testing the limits of what each was willing to do for what they believed was right. Eleanor observed the school from inside her discreet car, mentally noting the schedules and routine of the place. After a week of investigation, she had already identified concerning patterns. Rick always picked up Lily exactly 15 minutes after classes ended, enough time to ensure there were no more parents or teachers around. The private investigator adjusted her dark glasses, focusing her attention on Ms. Harrison, who was just leaving the building. In recent days, she had noticed how the educator watched Lily with obvious concern. Perhaps it was time for a conversation. She got out of the car and intercepted Ms. Harrison before she reached the bus stop. "Ms. Harrison, can we talk for a moment?" Ms. Harrison stopped, looking suspiciously at the well-dressed woman. Approaching her, "Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor. I'm a private investigator working on a case involving one of your students, Lily." The girl's name completely changed Ms. Harrison's demeanor. "Get in my car," she said, looking around with concern. "It's not safe to talk here." Once inside the vehicle, Ms. Harrison unburdened all her suspicions. The disturbing drawings, the marks Lily tried to hide, the constant fear in her eyes. "I've tried to alert the administration, but her aunt is very convincing. She always has. An explanation for everything. Sarah is a nurse, isn't she?" Eleanor consulted her notes. "Works at Central Hospital night shift." "Yes, and her husband has been unemployed for several months. He was a city inspector, but I heard rumors about bribes." Ms. Harrison hesitated. "Why are you investigating? Who hired you?" "I can't reveal my client's name," Eleanor replied professionally. "But I can assure you he's genuinely concerned about Lily's welfare." On the other side of town, Lawrence faced his own challenges. Sitting in his office at the development company, he tried to concentrate on the reports in front of him, but his mind kept returning to Lily. "You're not well," Theodore entered without knocking, throwing a folder on his desk. "3 meetings. Cancelled this week, late reports, and now this. A request for a private investigation? What are you getting yourself into, Lawrence? It's none of your business, Theodore. It is my business when it starts affecting our business." Theodore sat down, his expression a mixture of concern and irritation. "I just received a very interesting call from City Hall. Apparently, all our projects need to undergo a special re-evaluation." Coincidence? Lawrence felt his chest tighten. "What exactly did they say?" "That they received an anonymous complaint about possible irregularities in our construction sites. They're going to do surprise inspections, review all permits." Theodore leaned forward. "What did you do to irritate someone at City Hall?" Before Lawrence could respond, his secretary rushed in. "Mr. Werner, there's an urgent call from the hospital." His heart immediately raced. The tests from the previous week had shown his heart condition was worsening, but he had been ignoring the medical recommendations. "Dr. Miller on line 1, the secretary informed, casting a concerned look at her boss. Theodore watched as Lawrence answered the call, noticing how his face gradually paled. When he hung up, he seemed to have aged 10 years. "I need to drastically reduce stress," he muttered, running his hand over his tired face. "Doctor's orders. Then stop this crazy investigation. You're risking not only your health, but the entire future of the company. We have employees who depend on us, Lawrence." "I can't," the response came firmly, surprising even Lawrence himself. "There's a child suffering, Theodore. I can't simply turn my back. Why do you care so much? You don't even know this girl." The question hit Lawrence like a punch. For a moment, he considered telling Theodore about Olivia, about how he had failed to protect his sister when they were children, but some wounds were too deep to expose. That same afternoon, at Lily's aunt and uncle's house, Elena was cleaning the kitchen while listening to the heated discussion between Sarah and Rick. Upstairs. "That damned investigator is poking around where he shouldn't," Rick's voice thundered. "He's already found out about my dismissal from City Hall." "Calm down," Sarah replied, her tone controlled as always. "We still have contacts inside. I've already arranged for him to have other concerns. What if they discover about the insurance, about how we got custody of Lily?" "Nobody is going to discover anything," Sarah cut him off. "All the documents were perfectly forged. Besides, who's going to believe a meddling businessman who never had children against us, the dedicated family who took in an orphaned niece?" Elena felt a chill hearing those words. Her suspicions about the couple had always been strong, but now she was beginning to understand the true dimension of the situation. The sound of footsteps coming down the stairs made her quickly return to her work. Sarah entered the kitchen, her nurse's uniform as impeccable as always. "I'm heading to my shift," she announced. "Rick went out to take care of some business. Keep an eye on the girl and remember, she's being punished. No food until tomorrow." Elena nodded silently, her heart heavy. As soon as Sarah left, she went up to Lily's room, finding the girl curled up on her bed. "Come, my angel," she whispered, extending her hand. "Let's go downstairs so I can make you some tea." In the basement, while secretly preparing a sandwich. For Lily, Elena observed the girl sitting at her small table. There was something different in her eyes today, a small flame of hope that wasn't there before. "The man in the suit came back today," Lily suddenly whispered, surprising Elena. "I saw him standing at the corner near school. He waved at me." Elena felt her heart race. Maybe, finally, someone could help, but she also knew how dangerous Rick and Sarah were. She had heard enough conversations to know that the fire that killed Lily's parents might not have been an accident. "You need to be careful, my angel," she warned, stroking the girl's hair. "Your aunt and uncle can't know you talked to him." "I know," Lily replied, biting into the sandwich eagerly, "but he seems different. When he looks at me, I don't see evil like in Uncle Rick's eyes." That night, while Lily slept upstairs and Eleanor prayed in her basement, Lawrence sat in his home office, staring at an old photograph. In it, a 7-year-old girl smiled, her almond-shaped eyes very similar to Lily's. "Forgive me, Olivia," he murmured to the photo of his sister. "I couldn't save you, but I promise I won't fail this time." The sound of the phone brought him back to the present. It was Eleanor. "We need to talk." The investigator's voice was tense. "I discovered something about the fire that killed Lily's parents, and about their life insurance. You won't believe what I found." Lawrence met Eleanor at a discreet cafe downtown. The private investigator seemed tenser than usual, a thick folder of documents on the table between them. "The life insurance policy of Lily's parents," she began, opening the folder, "had a specific clause. The full amount would only be paid in case of accidental death of both parents. And guess who was the secondary beneficiary?" "Sarah," Lawrence answered, feeling his stomach turn. "Exactly, but that's not all." Eleanor pulled out more papers. "The fire started in the middle of the night. The official report says it was caused by a short circuit, but I found inconsistencies. The forensic photos show burn patterns that suggest the use of accelerants." "You're saying it was deliberate?" "I'm saying someone very much wanted to make it look like an accident." She lowered her voice. "And there's more. Do you know who signed the final forensic report? An old colleague of Rick's from City Hall." Lawrence felt his chest tighten. He breathed deeply, remembering the medical recommendations. "We need concrete evidence. It won't be easy. Rick has many friends at City Hall, people he helped for years by approving irregular construction. They're willing to protect him. Is that why they're creating problems for my company?" Eleanor nodded. "But I discovered something interesting about Rick. He wasn't simply caught taking bribes, he was involved in a larger scheme of approving illegal construction, and there are rumors that he keeps a file with compromising information on various public officials. The coffee grew cold between them as they discussed the next steps. Outside, the city continued its routine, oblivious to the drama unfolding at that discreet table. At school, Lily tried to concentrate on her math lesson, but her thoughts kept returning to the conversation she had overheard the night before. Her aunt and uncle were talking about a man who was asking questions, and Rick seemed very nervous. Ms. Harrison observed her student with growing concern. Since her conversation with the private investigator, she was even more attentive to the signs. Today, Lily seemed especially distracted, and there was a new mark on her neck, partially hidden by her shirt collar. During break time, Miss Harrison found Lily alone, as always, sitting on a bench away from the playground. "Not hungry today?" she asked gently, noticing the closed lunchbox beside the girl. Lily shook her head. "Aunt Sarah said I don't deserve to eat. I was rude." Ms. Harrison's heart sank. "What did you do that was so serious?" "I dropped a glass of water," the girl replied quietly. Uncle Rick got really angry. Before Ms. Harrison could respond, a movement at the school fence caught her attention. A man in a suit was watching Lily intently. For a moment she felt afraid. Could he be an associate of Rick's? But then she noticed how Lily relaxed slightly upon seeing him. "Do you know that man?" she asked cautiously. "He tried to help." "Me once," Lily replied, a different gleam in her eyes. "But Uncle Rick got really mad." The man waved discreetly and moved away, disappearing around the corner. Ms. Harrison made a mental note to mention this presence to the investigator. In the basement of Lily's aunt and uncle's house, Elena was organizing her few belongings when she heard the argument begin upstairs. It was earlier than normal. Rick usually waited for Sarah to leave for her shift before starting his lectures. "You talked to someone at school, didn't you?" Rick's voice thundered. "The teacher's been asking too many questions." "I didn't say anything, Uncle, I swear," Lily cried. The sound of something breaking made Eleanor tremble. She grabbed her rosary, beginning to pray as she always did in these moments. But today, something was different. Lily's pleas seemed more desperate. "Rick, control yourself," Sarah's voice sounded alarmed. "The neighbors will hear. I don't care. This brat is ruining everything. First that meddling businessman, now the teacher. Do you know how long it took to set up this plan? The work we put into the fire?" Eleanor froze. It was the first time. She had heard direct mention of the fire. She had always suspected, but hearing the confirmation, the sound of more things breaking was followed by a cry of pain that made her blood run cold. These weren't the usual cries. There was something different, more urgent. She ran up the stairs, momentarily forgetting her own fear. When she reached the living room, the scene made her stop. Lily was lying near the wall, a trickle of blood running from her forehead. Rick was being held back by Sarah, the belt still in his hand. "My God, what have you done?" Elena ran too, Lily checking her vital signs with trembling hands. "This is none of your business," Rick shouted, but there was fear in his eyes now. "Go back to your basement." "She needs a doctor," Elena declared, her voice finding a firmness she didn't know she possessed. "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah intervened, her professional nurse tone. "It's just a superficial wound. I'll take care of it." But Elena could see it was more than that. Lily was very pale, her breathing irregular. "If you don't call an ambulance, I will," she declared, surprising herself with her courage. "And who's going to believe you?" Rick laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. "An old illegal immigrant?" Elena stood up, still protecting Lily with her body. "Maybe the same man who's been investigating you. I know he exists, and I know about the fire." Rick's face changed, all color draining from it. Sarah stepped forward, her mask of calm finally. cracking. "You wouldn't dare," she said through clenched teeth. "You know what happens to illegal immigrants who cause problems." Elena was trembling but remained firm. "I also know what happens to murderers." The silence that followed was broken by a weak moan from Lily. The girl tried to move and fainted. "I'll call an ambulance," Sarah suddenly decided. "But you," she pointed at Elena, "will keep quiet." Lily fell down the stairs. "Understand? It was an accident." While they waited for the ambulance, Elena held Lily's hand, whispering prayers in Spanish. She knew she had crossed a line. Her life would never be the same after tonight. But looking at the girl's bruised face, she knew she had made the right choice. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, Lawrence was receiving an urgent call from one of his contacts at City Hall. The information he was about to discover would completely change the course of the investigation and put everyone in even more danger. The hospital corridor was quiet at that hour of the night. Sarah, still in her nurse's uniform, spoke softly with the doctors, her performance as the concerned aunt perfectly rehearsed. Elena observed from a distance, sitting in one of the plastic chairs, her hands still trembling slightly as she held her rosary. "It was a bad fall down the stairs," Sarah explained, her voice choked with an emotion she didn't feel. "I always tell her not to run inside the house, but children are like that, aren't they?" The doctor was making notes on his clipboard, apparently convinced by the story. After all, household accidents were common, and Sarah was a respected colleague at the hospital. Rick had stayed home, supposedly to clean up the mess from the fall. Eleanor knew he was actually eliminating any evidence of the true nature of Lily's injuries. The Salvadoran woman closed her eyes, recalling the moment when the ambulance arrived. There was so much blood on the living room floor. How could they believe it was just a fall? "Ma'am?" A gentle voice brought her back to the present. It was a young nurse, different from those who normally worked with Sarah. "The girl is asking for Ms. Elena. Is that you?" Before she could answer, Sarah materialized at her side like a shadow. "I'm the legal guardian," she declared firmly. "I'll see my niece now." "I'm sorry, but she specifically asked for Ms. Elena," the nurse insisted, seeming genuinely concerned. "She's very agitated." Sarah gave Elena an icy look. "You may go," she said through clenched teeth, "but remember what we discussed." Elena followed the nurse to the room where Lily was. Her heart ached at the sight of the girl in the hospital bed, looking even smaller and more fragile than usual. She had a bandage on her forehead and various visible bruises on her arms and neck. "Grandma Eleanor," Lily whispered when she saw her, using the affectionate nickname she had created for the Salvadoran woman. Her eyes were watery. "Don't let them take me back." "Shh, my angel." Eleanor sat beside the bed, holding the small hand between her wrinkled ones. "You need to rest now." "I'm scared," the girl continued, her voice so low it could barely be heard. "Uncle Rick said he'll hurt me more if I tell the truth." Elena felt her own tears begin to fall. How had she allowed this situation to get to this point? For how long had her fear of deportation prevented her from doing the right thing? Outside the room, Sarah observed through the glass window, her face a mask of maternal concern for anyone passing by. But Elena could see the threat in her eyes. At that moment, on the other side of town, Lawrence was in his office trying to process the information he had just received. His contact at City Hall had sent documents linking Rick to a series of irregular construction approvals, including a building that had caught fire a few years earlier. "The same pattern," he murmured to himself, spreading the papers across his desk. "The same modus operandi as the fire that killed Lily's parents." His phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Lily is in the hospital," the investigator was direct. "Supposedly fell down the stairs, but my sources say the injuries aren't consistent with a fall." Lawrence felt his heart dangerously accelerate. "I'm going there." "Wait," Eleanor interrupted him. "There's more. I got access to her previous medical records. It's not the first time she's shown up in the ER with household accidents, and whenever that happens, she's treated by Sarah or some specific doctor from her shift. They're covering up the abuse," Lawrence concluded, anger growing in his chest. "Yes, but there's something even more disturbing. I found records of other children who were under Sarah and Rick's guardianship before Lily, all orphans, all with histories of accidents." My God, Lawrence felt the air leave his lungs. It's a pattern. Exactly. They identify vulnerable. Families get close to them and then accidents happen. There's always a life insurance policy involved, always with Sarah as the secondary beneficiary. The revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just about Lily. It was a larger scheme, more perverse than they had imagined. "We need concrete evidence," he said, already grabbing his keys. "I'm going to the hospital. Keep investigating." At the hospital, Eleanor remained at Lily's side, who had finally fallen asleep thanks to the medication. The Salvadoran woman observed the girl's bruised face, making a decision that would change everything. She rose silently and walked over to the young nurse who had called her before. "Miss," she called softly, "I need to tell you something very important about how Lily really got hurt." The nurse looked around, making sure Sarah wasn't nearby, and took Elena to a private room. There, protected by white walls and medical confidentiality, the Salvadoran woman finally let the truth escape. She told everything: the constant abuse, the disproportionate punishments, the suspicious conversations, about the fire that killed Lily's parents. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice remained firm. "I know I could be deported for doing this," she concluded, silent tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "But I can't stay quiet anymore. That girl will die if she stays with them." The nurse, visibly affected by the account, began taking detailed notes. "I'll contact social services immediately," she assured. "You did the right thing." What neither of them knew was that outside the room, a figure had heard every word. Sarah, who had discreetly followed Elena, was now moving away with silent steps, her normally controlled face contorted into a mask of fury. She took out her cell phone and quickly typed a message to Rick. "The old woman talked. We need to act now." In his car, on the way to the hospital, Lawrence tried to stay calm. The cardiologist had been clear about avoiding stressful situations, but how could he keep his distance now? His thoughts were interrupted by a call from Theodore. "I just received a notification from City Hall." His partner sounded worried. "They're threatening to halt all our projects if we don't stop the investigation. Whatever you're doing, you're messing with dangerous people, Lawrence." "I can't stop now, Theodore," he replied, parking his car at the hospital. "There's much more at stake than our business." When he hung up, an old memory hit him with full force. Olivia, his little sister, had also been hospitalized multiple times when she was in foster care. At the time, they believed the caretaker's explanations. When the truth came to light, it was too late. "Not this time," he murmured to himself, entering the hospital. "I won't fail again." What he didn't know was that, at that exact moment, events were being set in motion that would forever change the fate of everyone involved. Sarah had already made her choice, and the consequences would be devastating. The hospital was strangely quiet when Lawrence arrived at Lily's room. The girl was sleeping, her bruised face partially hidden by bandages. Elena was sitting beside her, holding her small hand between her wrinkled ones. The Salvadoran woman raised her eyes when he entered, immediately recognizing him from the time she'd seen him watching the house. "You're the man who tried to help?" she said quietly, with a slight accent. "Yes." Lawrence approached the bed, feeling his heart tighten at the sight of the bruises on Lily's neck and arms. "How is she?" "Bad," Elena replied, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. I finally told the nurse the truth about everything, the abuse, the punishments, the suspicious conversations about the fire. You did the right thing, he assured her, placing a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. But I'm afraid, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Sarah disappeared after I spoke with the nurse, and she's not the type to give up easily. As if to confirm her fears, a commotion began in the hallway. Raised voices were approaching the room. I'm her aunt, her legal guardian. Sarah's voice sounded authoritative. You can't prevent me from seeing her. Ma'am, please. A male voice tried to calm her. We have to follow protocol in cases of suspected abuse. Lawrence instinctively positioned himself between the door and Lily's bed. Elena stood up too, trembling but determined. Sarah burst into the room, followed by 2 hospital security guards and the young nurse who had received Elena's report. Her normally controlled eyes now shone with barely contained fury. You, she pointed at Lawrence, I knew you were behind all this. And you, she turned to Elena, you ungrateful old woman, after all we did for you. All you did. Elena found courage in her indignation. Like letting a child go hungry? Like beating her until... Be careful what you say, Sarah cut her off, her voice low and threatening. Your accusations are very serious, and who's going to believe an illegal immigrant? I believe her, Lawrence stepped forward, and I have enough evidence to show this isn't the first time you and Rick have done this. Something changed in Sarah's face, a flash of fear quickly masked by anger. You don't know what you're talking about, she said through clenched teeth. You're destroying a family because of the delusions of a senile old woman and your own hero fantasies. I know about the other orphans, he continued, keeping his voice firm despite his racing heart. About the accidents, the life insurance policies, the pattern you and Rick have established over the years. Sarah laughed, a humorless sound. Prove it. Prove anything you're saying. At that moment, Lily began to stir in the bed, her eyes slowly opening. Upon seeing Sarah, her small body instinctively curled up. Please, she whispered, her voice weak. I don't want to go back. Nobody's going to take you back, Lawrence promised, without taking his eyes off Sarah. Don't be ridiculous, Sarah stepped forward. I'm the only family she has. The judge will never give custody to a stranger who doesn't even have children. The words hit Lawrence like a knife. It was the same argument that had prevented him from keeping Olivia with him so many years ago. Things are different now, he replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. I have resources. I can fight. Ah, your precious resources, Sarah smiled cruelly. How's your company doing, Mr. Werner? I heard you're having problems with City Hall. It would be a shame if all your projects were shut down, wouldn't it? Before Lawrence could respond, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Eleanor. Urgent. Discovered something about Rick's file. He wasn't bluffing about having compromising information, but it's not just about City Hall employees. At that moment, the young nurse, who had discreetly left during the discussion, returned with reinforcements, 2 police officers and a social worker. Ms. Sarah, one of the officers began, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about the minor's injuries. This is ridiculous. Sarah maintained her composure, but her hands trembled slightly. I already explained it was an accident. She fell down the stairs. The injuries aren't consistent with the fall, the social worker intervened, and we have Ms. Elena's testimony. An illegal immigrant? That's your witness? Sarah laughed again. Please, be professional. We also have the previous medical records, the social worker continued, impassive, a concerning pattern of household accidents, all conveniently treated during your shifts. Sarah's face subtly changed. Lawrence, who was watching her closely, noticed the exact moment when she realized she was cornered. I need to make a call, she said suddenly, grabbing her cell phone. My husband needs to know. Ma'am, please come with us. The officer stepped forward. It all happened very Quickly, Sarah typed something on her phone, and before anyone could stop her, ran out of the room. The officers went after her, but she knew the hospital well. It was her territory. "She's going to warn Rick," Elena said, alarmed. "He'll destroy any evidence that still exists." Lawrence grabbed his own phone, quickly dialing Eleanor. "We need to act now. Sarah escaped. She's going to alert Rick. I'm already at their house." The investigator's voice sounded tense. "Theodore is with me." "Theodore?" Lawrence frowned, confused. "What's he doing there?" "He discovered something big, about Rick's file and about the fire that killed Lily's parents. But we need to hurry. There's movement in the house. I think Rick is—" The call dropped abruptly. Lawrence tried to call back, but it went straight to voicemail. In the hospital bed, Lily began to cry silently. Elena hugged her, murmuring words of comfort in Spanish. "Everything will be all right, my angel," she promised, although her own voice trembled. "We won't let them hurt you again." Lawrence looked at the girl, so small and frightened, and felt a fierce determination grow in his chest. His weak heart didn't matter. The threats to his company didn't matter. He wouldn't fail this time. "Stay with her," he told Eleanor. "I'm going to the house. I need to prevent Rick from destroying the evidence." "Be careful," Elena pleaded. "He's a dangerous man." "I know how to take care of myself," he replied, although his racing heart protested. Before leaving, he approached Lily's bed. The girl looked at him with her large almond eyes, so similar to Olivia's. "I promise I'll come back," he said softly. "And when I return, we'll make sure you never have to be afraid again." What he didn't know was that Sarah and Rick had a much more sinister contingency plan than anyone could imagine, and that in the next few hours, everyone involved would be pushed to the limit of their strength in a desperate race against time. The light rain that was falling made the streets slippery as Lawrence drove toward Rick and Sarah's house. His heart beat irregularly in his chest, ignoring all medical warnings about stress. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close to discovering the whole truth. In the passenger seat, his phone remained silent. No response from Eleanor or Theodore. The silence worried him more than any direct threat. When he turned the corner onto their street, he spotted Theodore's car haphazardly parked on the sidewalk. The driver's door open. All the lights in the house were on, and shadows moved frantically across the windows. He parked a few meters behind and got out, the light rain soaking his suit. He approached cautiously, years of experience on the streets teaching him to read. The signs of danger. The front door was ajar. From inside, he could hear raised voices. "Where's the file?" Theodore's voice sounded urgent. "We know you kept everything." "I don't know what you're talking about," Rick replied, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his nervousness. Lawrence entered silently, following the voices to the living room. The scene he found made him stop at the door. Rick was cornered against the wall, his face red with anger or fear. Theodore was facing him with an expression his partner had never seen before. Eleanor was next to an overturned bookshelf, documents scattered across the floor. "Lawrence!" Theodore noticed his presence first. "He's destroying everything. We arrived and he was already burning papers in the backyard." "You have no right," Rick shouted, his face contorted. "You're breaking into my house." "We have every right," Eleanor responded coldly, holding up a charred paper. "Especially after finding this." Lawrence approached to see the document. It was an insurance policy, partially burned but still legible. The names of Lily's parents were clearly visible, along with a handwritten note. "Confirm faulty electrical installation before deadline." "You planned everything." Lawrence felt bile rise in his throat. "The fire wasn't an accident." You can't prove anything." Rick stepped forward, but Theodore stopped him. "I can prove much more than you think," Theodore said, his voice carrying contained rage. "Do you know why I'm here, Rick? Because I discovered you were the inspector responsible for approving the construction of the building where my sister lived. The building that collapsed 5 years ago, killing her and 3 other families. The revelation hit Lawrence like a shock. Theodore never talked about the tragedy that had taken his sister. He always avoided the subject when someone mentioned the collapse that had shocked the city. "It was you," Theodore continued, his voice trembling with emotion. "You approved a structure that you knew was unsafe. And then, when the investigation started, you used your blackmail file to cover it all up. It's not my fault if people are corruptible." Rick tried to maintain his arrogance, but his face was growing increasingly pale. "Everyone has their price." "And what was your price?" Lawrence asked, stepping closer. "How much did Sarah pay you to help with her schemes?" A flash of panic crossed Rick's eyes. "Don't bring Sarah into this. She didn't." "She didn't what?" Eleanor interrupted. "Wasn't she the mastermind behind everything? Wasn't she the one who figured out how to use life insurance policies to profit from tragedies? How many other families did you destroy before Lily's parents?" At that moment, Rick's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face completely changed. "Too late," he said with a sinister smile. "You've lost." Before anyone could stop him, he ran to the back of the house. Theodore went after him, but stopped abruptly at the kitchen door. "My God," he whispered. "Lawrence, come see this." In the backyard, under the rain that was now falling harder, a bonfire was consuming piles of documents. The smell of burning paper mixed with something stronger, more chemical. "He soaked everything with gasoline," Eleanor observed, her face illuminated by the flames. "Nothing will be left." "We don't need the documents," Theodore said, taking out his phone. "I have everything recorded, every conversation, every threat. I've been gathering evidence for months since I discovered his connection to the building collapse." Lawrence's phone vibrated. A message from the hospital. His heart froze as he read, "Sarah disappeared with Lily. The Salvadoran woman is injured. Come quickly." "No," he murmured, feeling his chest dangerously tighten. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Eleanor noticed his distress. "It was a distraction," he replied, already running to his car. "While we were here, Sarah—" The sound of an engine starting interrupted him. Rick had managed to reach his garage through the backyard and was now leaving at high speed, nearly running over Lawrence. "He's going to meet Sarah," Eleanor shouted, running to her own car. "Go after him," Theodore ordered. "I'll take this evidence to the police. They can't escape, not this time." Lawrence got into his car, his hands trembling so badly he could barely turn the key. His heart was beating so hard it hurt. "Not now," he murmured to himself, feeling the beginning of an attack. "Please, not now." But his body seemed to have other plans. The pain in his chest increased. His vision began to blur. Olivia's face danced in his mind, mixing with Lily's. "I won't fail again," he said through clenched teeth, forcing himself to focus. "Not this time." He started the car and accelerated down the wet street, following the taillights of Eleanor's car. In his chest, his heart violently protested against the effort, but he couldn't stop. Not when Lily needed him more than ever. What he didn't know was that Sarah and Rick had one last desperate act planned. A plan that would put everyone at risk and force Lawrence to make the most difficult choice of his life. The hospital was in chaos when Lawrence arrived, ignoring the searing pain in his chest. In the hallway outside Lily's room, he found Elena being treated by nurses. The Salvadoran woman had a cut on her forehead and was holding her right arm close to her body. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I tried to stop her, but Sarah, she was like a mad woman." "What happened?" Lawrence asked, trying to control his own irregular breathing. "Sarah came back with 2 men, Elena explained between sobs. "Said she had a court order to take Lily. When I tried to stop them, they pushed me." The little one was screaming so much. The young nurse who had helped before approached, her face pale with concern. "We tried to stop them, but they really did have an official document. How they got it so quickly." "Rick," Lawrence murmured, remembering the contacts the former inspector claimed to have. He must have someone in the judicial system too. His phone rang. It was Eleanor. "I'm following their car," she said without preamble. "They took the highway toward the coast. But something's strange, Lawrence. They're not running away. It seems like they're going somewhere specific." In the background, Lawrence could hear the sound of the engine at high speed and rain hitting the windshield. "Don't lose sight of them," he requested, already running to his car. "I'm on my way." "Wait!" Elena's voice made him stop. The Salvadoran woman had disentangled herself from the nurses and was stumbling toward him. "Before you go," Sarah dropped this in the confusion. It was a crumpled paper. It looked like an old deed. Lawrence carefully unfolded the document, his eyes scanning the faded words. "My God," he murmured, understanding hitting him like lightning. "That's where they're going." On the rain-slicked highway, Eleanor maintained a safe distance from Rick's car. Through the fogged glass, she could see Sarah's silhouette in the passenger seat, and in the back seat, Lily's small figure. Her phone rang. It was Theodore. "The police are on their way," he informed. "But there's something you need to know. That deed we found, it's for a property on the coast. An old abandoned factory. And," Eleanor pressed, feeling there was more, "it was where Rick approved his irregular construction projects, where he kept his blackmail files, and where other accidents happened." Eleanor's stomach contracted. They're not running away, she realized. They're going to erase all traces. In the car ahead of her, Lily was curled up in the back seat, trembling not just from cold, but from fear. Sarah had tied her hands with a strip of cloth, saying it was for her own good. "Where are you taking me?" she asked in a small voice. "Shut up!" Rick shouted from the front seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. "She needs to know," Sarah said, her tone frighteningly calm. "After all, it's a family reunion." Something in the way she said it made Lily tremble even more. Through the car window, she could see the city lights fading behind them, swallowed by the darkness of the rainy night. Lawrence drove as fast as he dared in the precarious road conditions, his heart protesting at every jolt of the car. The document that Elena had given him was on the seat beside him, its implications weighing like lead on his conscience. The deed wasn't just for any property. It was the location where other orphans had disappeared before Lily, children whose cases were never solved, whose bodies were never found. His phone rang again. It was Miss Harrison, Lily's teacher. "Mr. Werner," her voice was choked. "I just received a very strange call. A woman. She said she worked with Sarah years ago. Said she needed to tell something about other children." "What exactly did she say?" Lawrence pressed, feeling they were about to discover the final piece of the puzzle. "That Sarah and Rick have done this before. Not just with Lily's parents, but with other families. Always the same pattern, a fire, a life insurance policy, and then..." The connection became unstable for a moment, the storm interfering with the signal. Ms. Harrison. They always took the children to an old factory on the coast," the teacher's voice returned, broken up. "She said that's where..." The call dropped completely. Lawrence threw the phone on the seat in frustration. His heart was beating more and more irregularly, and dark spots began to dance in his vision. "Not now," he murmured, clutching his chest. "Please, not now." Ahead, he could see the headlights of Eleanor's car, which was following Rick's vehicle. The rain was getting heavier, making visibility increasingly worse. In the passenger seat, his phone rang again. It was Theodore. "Lawrence, the police are in pursuit, but it's going to take them time to get there. The storm knocked down some trees on the main road. They need to take a detour." "We don't have time," Lawrence replied, feeling a particularly sharp pain in his chest. "Sarah and Rick are desperate, and desperate people..." "Don't do anything stupid," Theodore interrupted him. Your heart. I've failed once, Theodore. I won't fail again. With that, he hung up and stepped on the accelerator, ignoring his body's protests. In the darkness ahead, he could see the lights of an abandoned industrial complex beginning to emerge. What they would find inside would be worse than any of them could imagine, and the choices they would have to make in the next few hours would change their lives forever. The old factory loomed against the stormy sky like a monstrous shadow, its broken windows reflecting the occasional lightning. Rick's car was already parked in the muddy yard when Lawrence arrived, closely followed by Eleanor. They went in through there. Eleanor pointed to a side door, partially covered by vegetation. Sarah was carrying Lily. Lawrence got out of the car, the heavy rain soaking his suit in seconds. His heart was beating so irregularly that he had to lean against the car body for a moment. "You're not well," Eleanor observed, concerned. "We should wait for the police." "We don't have time," he replied through clenched teeth, straightening with effort. "Lily doesn't have time." They entered the abandoned building, the smell of mold and decay hitting them immediately. Their footsteps echoed on the cracked concrete floor, raising dust accumulated from years of abandonment. "This way," Eleanor whispered, pointing to recent marks in the dust. They went to the basement. A rusty metal staircase led to the bowels of the building. Each step creaked under their feet, threatening to reveal their presence. From below, they could hear muffled voices. "We don't have a choice now," Rick's voice echoed. "We need to end this once and for all." "She's just a child," Sarah replied, her tone surprisingly emotional. "Like the others. And she'll end up like the others," Rick cut her off, "unless you have a better idea." Lawrence and Eleanor looked at each other, the horror of realization hitting them simultaneously. It wasn't just about Lily. It was about all the other children who had disappeared before her. They continued descending, the air getting heavier. The factory basement was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, some still with abandoned equipment covered by dusty sheets. A muffled sob guided them to a partially open door. Through the gap, they could see Lily sitting in a corner, her hands still tied. Sarah was standing near her, her face a mask of conflict. Rick was pacing back and forth, agitated. "They have evidence now," he continued, nervously running his hands through his hair. "That damn businessman and his partner, they know about everything. The file, the insurance policies, the other children." "Then let's leave," Sarah exploded. "We take the money we've saved and disappear." "Don't be stupid. They'll never stop looking for us, not after they discover about the others." "The others?" Lily's small voice sounded in the silence that followed. "What others?" Rick stopped pacing, turning slowly to the girl. There was something disturbing about his smile. "Want to know about the others, little one? About all the children who came before you. How about I show you?" "Rick, no!" Sarah tried to stop him, but he was already dragging Lily to another room. Lawrence made a move to interfere, but Eleanor held him back. "Wait," she whispered. "We need to know." In the adjacent room, Rick turned on a flashlight, illuminating several photos pinned to the wall. Children's faces smiled in yellowed images. "See this one?" He pointed to a girl of about 8 years old. Clara Reynolds. Her parents died in an accidental fire 5 years ago. The insurance paid very well. He moved the light to another photo. "And this is Michael Garcia, 7 years old, also lost his parents in a tragic accident. And here..." "Enough!" Sarah shouted, her hands trembling. "She doesn't need to know this." "Why not?" Rick laughed, a humorless sound. "She's going to join them anyway, just like all the others who discovered too much." It was at that moment that Lawrence felt his heart fail. The pain in his chest exploded with an intensity that made him stagger, knocking over a nearby shelf. The noise alerted Rick and Sarah. "Someone's here!" Rick pulled something from his jacket. It looked like a rusty screwdriver. "Police!" Eleanor shouted, taking advantage of the confusion to enter the room. "Freeze!" But Rick had already grabbed Lily, using her as a shield. "Not another step!" He pressed the screwdriver against the girl's neck. "Or she joins the others right now!" Lawrence dragged himself into the room, leaning against the wall. His vision was blurred, but he could see the terror in Lily's eyes. "Let her go," he managed to say, his voice weak. "Please." "Look who came to visit us," Rick smiled maniacally. "The soft-hearted businessman. How's your heart now, huh?" "Rick?" Sarah stepped forward, something changing in her expression. "Enough. This has gone too far." "Too far?" He turned to her, incredulous. "You're the one who started all this. You're the one who figured out how to use the insurance policies, how to choose the right families." "I never wanted to hurt the children," Sarah screamed, tears streaming down her face. It was just to get the money." "And what do you think happened to them?" Rick laughed again. "Do you think they were all adopted by happy families? That they're somewhere playing and smiling?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at the photos on the wall as if seeing them for the first time. "What did you do?" she whispered, growing horror in her voice. "What did you do with them?" "What was necessary," Rick replied coldly. "What you never had the courage to do." At that moment, a particularly strong thunderclap shook the building. The flashlight flickered, plunging the room into dancing shadows. Lawrence felt he was about to faint. The pain in his chest was almost unbearable now. But through the fog that was beginning to cloud his vision, he saw something the others hadn't noticed. Lily, still in Rick's arms, had managed to free her hands from the bindings. The girl looked directly at him, as if asking permission. He nodded slightly, praying she would understand. What happened next was so fast that later no one could say exactly how it occurred. Lily sank her teeth into Rick's arm with all the strength she could muster. He screamed, reflexively letting her go. Eleanor lunged forward, but slipped on the wet floor. Sarah, finally emerging from her horrified trance, grabbed Lily and pushed her toward Lawrence. "Go," she shouted. "I'll hold him." But Rick had already recovered. With a roar of fury, he advanced not toward Lily, but toward Sarah. "You traitor!" He brandished the screwdriver. The rusty metal reflected one last lightning flash before disappearing into the shadows of the abandoned factory. Sarah's scream echoed off the damp basement walls, mingling with the sound of the storm. Lawrence, still fighting the pain in his chest, pulled Lily behind him. Eleanor finally managed to stand, positioning herself between them and Rick. "My God!" Sarah clutched her arm, where the screwdriver had made a deep cut. You killed all of them." Rick was panting, the rusty metal now stained with blood in his hand. "What did you think happened to them? That they simply disappeared into thin air?" I thought you took them away. To other families." "Other families," he laughed, a sound that made Lily cower even more behind Lawrence. "And risk they would talk, that they would tell about our little business?" "They were just children," Sarah shouted, backing up until she hit the wall. "Innocent children." "Children grow up." Rick took a step toward her. "They grow up and talk, like that first one, what was her name again? Marina, Sarah whispered, her face losing all color. "The first girl we took." "Yes, Marina. Remember how she cried? How she begged to go back home?" Rick continued, advancing. "That's when I realized we couldn't leave witnesses, not one." Lawrence felt his heart failing more and more, but he couldn't give up now. He needed to get Lily out of there. The girl was trembling against his back, her small hands clutching his soaked suit. "Eleanor," he whispered with difficulty, "take her out of here." "Not without you," the investigator replied without taking her eyes off Rick. "Please," he insisted, feeling his legs weaken. I can't let it happen again." The image of Olivia, his little sister, flashed in his mind. how she had begged not to be taken to that foster home, how he, still a child himself, could do nothing to prevent it, how months later he received the news that she had accidentally drowned in the bathtub. "Nobody's going anywhere," Rick roared, suddenly turning toward them. "All of you know too much now." "It's over, Rick," Eleanor tried to sound firm. "The police are on their way. Theodore has all the evidence." "Evidence?" He laughed again. "What evidence? Everything in this factory has already been destroyed. Years of records, all the blackmail files, all burned before you arrived." "Not everything," a weak voice sounded from the entrance of the room. Everyone turned to see Sarah, still holding her injured arm, but now with something in her other hand. It looked like an old flash drive. "What is that?" Rick asked, his voice dangerously low. "My insurance," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the pain. "I kept copies of everything, every document, every photo, every bank transfer record. I was protecting myself from you." "You traitorous bitch!" Rick advanced toward her, the screwdriver raised. That's when several things happened at once. Eleanor managed to grab Rick's arm, making him drop the improvised weapon. Sarah threw the flash drive toward Lawrence, who fell to his knees trying to reach it. "Lily," he called weakly. Take this." The girl hesitated for a moment, but then ran and grabbed the small device, clutching it to her chest, as if her life depended on it. Rick managed to break free from Eleanor with a sudden movement, throwing her against the wall. Sarah tried to run, but he caught her, grabbing her hair. "Where's the rest?" he shouted, violently shaking her. "I know there's more. You always have a plan B." "Help!" Sarah screamed, trying to break free. "Please, someone!" "Shut up." Rick threw her to the ground forcefully. "The happy family game is over. I should have killed you along with the children." Lawrence tried to stand, but his body wouldn't respond anymore. The pain in his chest had become unbearable, and black spots danced in his vision. He saw, as if in slow motion, Rick pick up something from the floor. Not the screwdriver, but a loose pipe. "No!" He tried to shout, but his voice was barely a whisper. Lily, still holding the flash drive, watched the scene with eyes wide with terror. It was the same look Olivia had on that last day, Lawrence realized. The same fear, the same silent plea for help. "Not this time," he murmured, gathering his last strength. With superhuman effort, ignoring the explosion of pain in his chest, he managed to stand. He staggered toward Rick, who had his back to him, the pipe already raised over Sarah. "Hey!" he called, his voice stronger than he thought possible. When Rick turned, Lawrence used all the weight of his body to push him. The two fell, knocking over an old shelf in the process. The sound of metal crashing against concrete was deafening. "Run!" he shouted to Lily, praying she would obey. The girl hesitated for a moment, tears streaming down her dirty face, but then turned and ran toward the stairs. Eleanor, who had managed to get up, went after her. "You're not going anywhere!" Rick tried to stand, but Lawrence held him with all the strength he could gather. "It ends here," he said through clenched teeth, feeling his heart dangerously failing. "You won't hurt anyone else." At that moment, lights began to flash at the top of the stairs. Authoritative voices echoed through the corridors of the abandoned factory. "Police! Freeze!" Rick froze, still trying to break free. Sarah, bleeding and trembling, began to laugh, a hysterical, almost maniacal sound. "It's over," she said between laughs and sobs. "It's really over." Lawrence felt his body beginning to give up. The pain in his chest was now so intense, he could barely breathe. But there was a smile on his face when darkness finally enveloped him. "Olivia," he whispered, closing his eyes. "Forgive me for taking so long." The constant beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the hospital room where Lawrence was admitted. 3 days had passed since the events at the abandoned factory, and he still hadn't regained consciousness. Lily was sitting in a chair near the bed, her small hands holding the much larger and motionless hand of the man who had risked everything to save her. "Will he wake up, Grandma Elena?" she asked for the 10th time that day, her small voice heavy with concern. The Salvadoran woman, who now wore a discreet bandage on her forehead, adjusted the shawl over the girl's shoulders. "Yes, my angel, he's strong, just resting." On the other side of the bed, Ms. Harrison observed the scene with tearful eyes. The teacher had practically moved into the hospital since Lawrence was admitted, taking turns with Eleanor in caring for Lily. "The doctor said his heart is more stable today," she commented, trying to sound optimistic. "That's a good sign." The door to the room opened, and Theodore entered, followed by Eleanor. Both looked exhausted, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in their eyes. "How is he?" Theodore asked, approaching the bed. "The same," Ms. Harrison replied softly, "but the doctors are optimistic." Eleanor approached Lily, crouching down, to the girl's level. "Hey, little one, I brought news that I think you'll want to hear." Lily looked up but didn't let go of Lawrence's hand. "The judge reviewed all the documents that were on the flash drive," Eleanor continued gently. "All the evidence about what Rick and Sarah did. They won't be able to hurt anyone anymore." "Never again?" Lily asked in a whisper. "Never again," Theodore confirmed, his voice firm. "They're going to be in prison for a very, very long time." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone processed what this meant. The investigations that followed the night at the factory had revealed horrors that no one was prepared to face. The police had found evidence of at least 6 other children who had gone through the same ordeal as Lily. Sarah, confronted with the evidence, finally broke down. She told everything: how she started by choosing vulnerable families, how she manipulated life insurance policies, how Rick used his contacts to cover up the crimes. "And the other children?" Lily suddenly asked, surprising everyone. "The ones who came before me?" The adults exchanged heavy looks. "How do you explain the extent of human cruelty to a 6-year-old child?" It was Ms. Harrison who finally answered, choosing her words carefully. "They're in a better place now, sweetie, a place where no one can hurt them." Lily nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she let on. She turned her eyes back to Lawrence, squeezing his hand more tightly. "He saved us," she said simply, "just like he wanted to save his sister." Theodore straightened, surprised. "How do you know about Olivia?" "He was saying her name when he was hurt," Lily replied. "He was apologizing for not saving her before." Elena covered her mouth with her hand, containing a sob. Ms. Harrison discreetly wiped away a tear. "You know, Lily," Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, "we found something interesting in the documents, something about your family." The girl looked up, curious. "Your parents? They didn't die by accident. Sarah and Rick planned everything, but there was something they didn't know, something your parents did to protect you." "What?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They left a letter with a lawyer, a letter that was only to be opened if something happened to them. In it, they said they were suspicious of Sarah, that she was acting strangely, asking questions about insurance." "They knew," Lily's voice trembled. "They suspected, and that's why they left very specific instructions about you, about who should take care of you if something happened to them. But why did they leave me with Aunt Sarah then?" "Because Rick used his contacts to hide the existence of that letter," Theodore intervened. "The lawyer was threatened, documents were altered. But now we have everything," Eleanor completed softly. "And do you know what your parents wanted? They wanted you to stay with your godmother, a very close friend of the family." "Miss Harrison?" Lily looked at her teacher with wide eyes. Ms. Harrison nodded, tears now flowing freely down her face. "Yes, sweetie, I was very good friends with your mother. When I started to suspect something was wrong, I tried to get closer, but Sarah and Rick always prevented it. But now, Theodore continued, with all the original documents recovered and the whole truth exposed, the judge will respect your parents' wishes. Lily looked from Ms. Harrison to Elena, then to Lawrence, still unconscious in the bed. Can I still see him?" she asked quietly. "And Grandma Elena?" "Of course, my angel." Elena approached, stroking her hair. "Whenever you want." "Actually," Eleanor cleared her throat, "there's one more thing about that. Elena, the judge reviewed your case too." The Salvadoran woman froze, fear returning to her eyes. "Considering your fundamental role in saving Lily and all the years you've already been in the country, well, you're going to receive your legal documentation. You can stay legally." Elena sank into the nearest chair, tears of relief streaming down her wrinkled face. "Gracias a Dios," she murmured repeatedly. The moment was interrupted by a subtle movement in the bed. Lawrence's fingers had moved slightly under Lily's hand. He squeezed my hand!" the girl exclaimed. Everyone moved closer to the bed, watching intently. Slowly, Lawrence's eyes began to open, blinking against the bright light of the room. "Lily?" His voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. "I'm here," she responded promptly, squeezing his hand. "You saved us." Lawrence tried to smile, though the effort was visible. "This time, I succeeded." "I'll get the doctor," Theodore said, already heading for the door. But before he could leave, Lawrence called out, "Theodore, forgive me. The company—" "Don't worry about that now," his partner interrupted him. "Besides, all our permits have been revalidated. It seems that when you expose a corruption scheme this big, people become more cooperative." A nurse entered the room, beginning to check Lawrence's vital signs. She asked everyone to leave so she could examine him properly. "No," Lily refused to let go of his hand. "I want to stay." The nurse looked at Ms. Harrison, who nodded. "It's okay, she can stay, just for a moment." When everyone else had left, Lily leaned closer to Lawrence. "You don't need to apologize to your sister anymore," she said softly. "You did what she wanted. You saved another child." Lawrence felt tears forming in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Outside the room, the adults spoke in hushed voices about the next steps, about how to help Lily process everything that had happened, about how to rebuild lives shattered by so much cruelty. But inside that hospital room, in that moment, there was just a little girl holding the hand of the man who had risked everything to save her, both finally beginning to believe that better days were possible. The weeks following Lawrence's hospitalization were ones of intense adaptation for everyone. Ms. Harrison had taken Lily to live in her small but welcoming apartment, transforming her office into a child's bedroom. The teacher spent hours awake, during the night, learning to deal with the girl's frequent nightmares. "I don't want to sleep," Lily would say, clutching her pillow. "What if they come back?" "They'll never come back, sweetheart," Ms. Harrison would hug her, feeling the small body tremble. "They're in prison, and they'll stay there for a long time." But it wasn't just the nightmares that needed to be faced. During the day, Lily would startle at sudden noises and had difficulty eating. Regularly, years of punishments involving food had left deep marks. The child psychologist who began seeing her explained that it would be a long process. "She's experienced severe trauma," she told Ms. Harrison. "She'll need a lot of support, a lot of patience, and most importantly, a lot of love." Elena came almost every day, bringing Salvadoran treats that slowly began to awaken Lily's appetite. The woman, now with her documents regularized, had secured a part-time job at a nearby bakery. "You need to eat to get strong, my angel," she would say, while preparing small corn cakes that filled Ms. Harrison's kitchen with a welcoming aroma. "How will you visit Mr. Lawrence if you don't have energy?" The hospital visits were the highlight of the day for Lily. Lawrence was recovering slowly. The heart attack had been serious, and the doctors insisted he would need to completely change his lifestyle. "No stress," The cardiologist was emphatic. Your blood pressure is still unstable and your heart needs time to strengthen. But how could he avoid stress when there was still so much to resolve? The trial of Rick and Sarah was approaching, and investigations continued to reveal disturbing details about their crimes. They found more records, Theodore informed during one of his daily visits. It looks like they'd been doing this longer than we thought. At least 10 years. Lawrence closed his eyes, feeling his chest tighten. And the families? The other children? The police are notifying all the relatives. Some families didn't even know there were suspicions about the deaths of their loved ones. They thought they were really accidents. At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was Lily, bringing a colorful drawing she had made at school. Look, she showed timidly. I drew all of us together. The drawing showed several figures holding hands, herself, Ms. Harrison, Elena, and Lawrence. In the background was a smiling sun and a colorful house. It's beautiful, little one, Lawrence smiled, feeling tears form. You have a lot of talent. The new teacher said I can make more, she continued, brightening a little. She said drawing helps put out what we feel inside. And what do you feel? He asked softly. Lily thought for a moment, her fingers playing with the hem of her shirt. A nervous habit she still maintained, though less frequently now. Sometimes I'm still afraid, she admitted quietly. But now it's different, because I know there are good people too. People who really help. Theodore discreetly wiped away a tear, turning toward the window. Lawrence extended his hand, which Lily promptly held. Do you know what else I drew? She continued, turning the page. On the other side were more figures, several children, all holding hands with colorful wings. These are the others, she explained, the ones who came before. The psychologist said they're at peace now. The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Ms. Harrison and Elena, bringing a small picnic basket. Since the doctor said you need to start walking a little, Ms. Harrison smiled, we thought about having a snack in the hospital garden. I helped make the muffins, Lily announced proudly, and I didn't burn any. She's becoming a real chef, Elena winked, helping to organize things. With Theodore's help, Lawrence managed to get out of bed. He still felt weak, but each day was a little better. The doctor had said he would soon be discharged, though he would need to continue treatment at home. The small group settled on a bench in the hospital garden, under the shade of an old tree. As they ate muffins and talked about simple day-to-day things, Lawrence observed how Lily gradually seemed more relaxed, more childlike. What are you thinking about? Ms. Harrison asked softly, noticing his distant look. About how strange life is, he replied. About how sometimes we need to lose everything to find something even more valuable. Are you talking about the company? Theodore told me you decided to step down as president. Not just that, he smiled, watching Lily try to teach Elena how to make origami from a napkin. I lost my sister so many years ago. Carried that guilt for so long, but maybe she guided me here, to Lily. Ms. Harrison nodded, understanding. Sometimes people enter our lives at the exact moment we need them, or when they need us. The sound of Lily's laughter, still shy but genuine, floated to them. It was a precious sound that weeks ago had seemed impossible. She still has a long road ahead, Ms. Harrison continued. We all do, but now she has a real family, people who truly care. A rather different family, Lawrence smiled. A teacher, a Salvadoran immigrant, a businessman with a heart condition, and a child who taught us more about courage and resilience than we could have imagined. Ms. Harrison completed. At that moment, as if sensing they were talking about her, Lily came running to them, her eyes shining with excitement. Grandma Elena is going to teach me how to make empanadas, she announced. Can we have a real picnic when you get out of the hospital? Of course, Lawrence replied, feeling his heart now stronger, filled with love. We'll have many picnics, and many other things too. Promise? She extended her pinky finger, a gesture she had learned from other children at school. Promise. He intertwined his finger with hers, sealing the commitment. As the afternoon sun cast golden shadows across the garden, the small group continued their improvised lunch, talking and laughing. To a casual observer, they would look like just an ordinary family enjoying a moment together. And perhaps, Lawrence thought, that's exactly what they were now. A family. Not in the traditional sense, but in the truest sense of the word. People, united not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by love, and by the courage to believe in better days, even after knowing the worst of humanity. 3 months had passed since Lawrence was discharged from the hospital. Fall was gently arriving in the city, painting the trees in golden and reddish hues. In his new apartment, a smaller, more welcoming place than his former penthouse, he was preparing for an important day, the final trial of Sarah and Rick. "Are you sure you want to go?" Ms. Harrison asked while helping him straighten his tie. "The doctor said you need to avoid stressful situations." "I need to be there," he replied, his fingers instinctively touching the spot where there was now a small scar from heart surgery. "For Lily, for all the other children." Lily, who now spent some weekends with him, was in the kitchen with Eleanor, preparing breakfast. In recent months, cooking had become a kind of therapy for the girl, something that was previously associated with punishment and deprivation was slowly transforming into moments of joy and connection. "I made pancakes," she announced proudly when they entered the kitchen, "with chocolate syrup, just how you like them." "But just a little syrup for him," Elena warned with an affectionate smile. "El corazón, remember?" Lawrence sat at the table, observing how different Lily looked now. There were still difficult moments, of course, nights when the nightmares returned, days when sudden noises made her cower. But there was also a lot of progress. "Will you see them today?" she asked suddenly, her voice more serious. "Yes, little one. But you don't have to go if you don't want to." Lily played with her fork for a moment before responding. "I want to go. The psychologist said it's important to face our fears, and I want them to see that they didn't break me." Ms. Harrison swallowed a sob, disguising it by serving more juice. Elena murmured a prayer in Spanish, making the sign of the cross. "Are you sure?" Lawrence asked gently. "Nobody will think badly of you if you don't want to go." "I'm sure," she answered with surprising firmness for her 7 years. "You taught me that sometimes we need to be brave, even when we're afraid." The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Theodore was waiting for them at the entrance, along with Eleanor. In recent months, the two had grown closer, united not only by the case, but by something deeper that was beginning to blossom between them. "Everything's ready," Eleanor informed in a low voice. "The evidence is irrefutable. The flash drive Sarah handed over had everything: bank records, photos, forged documents. There's no way they can escape." "And the families?" Lawrence asked, holding Lily's hand firmly. "They've all been notified," Theodore replied. "Some are here today. They needed to see justice done." Inside the courtroom, they sat in the front rows. Lily was between Lawrence and Ms. Harrison, with Elena right behind them, still murmuring prayers. When Sarah and Rick were brought in, a heavy silence fell over the room. They were handcuffed, wearing prison uniforms, a very different sight from the carefully constructed image they had maintained before. Sarah seemed to have aged years in just a few months. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, were now dull, lost. Rick, on the other hand, maintained an expression of defiance, although his hands visibly trembled. The trial proceeded like a succession of revealed horrors. Each piece of evidence presented, each testimony given, painted an increasingly dark picture of their crimes. The defendants, the prosecutor declared, not only murdered the parents of their victims, but subjected innocent children to systematic physical and psychological torture. And when these children threatened to expose their crimes, Lily squeezed Lawrence's hand tightly. He looked at her, concerned, but she kept her eyes fixed ahead, determined. A mother stood up in the audience, holding a photo of her daughter, one of the first victims. "Where is my Marina?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. "What did you do with her?" Sarah began to sob, her whole body trembling. Rick remained silent, but his face had lost all color. When it came time for the sentences, no one in the room was breathing. The judge adjusted his glasses, his face grave as he read the document. For the crimes of aggravated murder, torture, child abuse, document forgery, fraud. The list continued, each crime more horrible than the last. This court sentences the defendants to the maximum penalty prescribed by law. A murmur ran through the room. Some people were crying, others silently applauding. "Is it over?" Lily asked quietly. "Yes, little one," Lawrence replied, pulling her into a hug. "They will never hurt anyone again." Before they were taken away, Sarah suddenly turned. "Lily," she called, her voice broken. "Forgive me, No." Rick tried to stop her from speaking. "Shut up, you idiot." But Sarah continued, the words pouring out like a dam, finally breaking. I knew about all of them. I knew what he did to the children. I could have stopped it, could have saved them. Forgive me." The guards began to take them away. Rick was still trying to silence Sarah, but she continued talking, her voice echoing through the courtroom. Their families deserve to know, deserve to bury their children. Lily stood up, her small figure erect, despite the tears running down her face. "I forgive you," she said clearly, her voice carrying a maturity beyond her years. "Not for you, but for me, because I don't want hate to make me like you." The silence that followed her words was almost palpable. Sarah sobbed harder, being practically carried out. Rick finally lost his mask of arrogance, his face contorting in an expression of total defeat. When they left the courthouse, the afternoon sun had a different glow. Lily walked between Lawrence and Miss Harrison, Elena right behind them, Theodore, and Eleanor closing the group. "You know what I want now?" Lily asked, her voice returning to the childlike tone it should have. "What, little one?" "That picnic you promised, with Grandma Elena's empanadas and everything." Lawrence smiled, feeling his heart now stronger, healthier, filled with love. "I think we can arrange that," he replied, looking at his unlikely but perfectly suitable family. As they walked to the car, the gentle autumn breeze carried promises of better days, days of healing, rebuilding, and true love. Days that all those other children deserved to have lived, but that Lily would also live for them. And somewhere, Lawrence knew, Olivia was smiling. A year had passed since the trial. Spring was arriving again, bringing flowers and a warm breeze that stirred the curtains in Lawrence's new apartment. In the kitchen, Lily was helping Elena prepare a special breakfast. It was her 8th birthday. "Be careful with the hot pan, my angel," Elena warned lovingly as the girl took another batch of muffins from the oven. "I know, Grandma," Lily replied with a confident smile. "I learned properly." In the living room, Miss Harrison was organizing the final details for the small party they would have later. Colorful balloons decorated the walls, and on the table was a decorated cake, the first that Lily had helped make from start to finish. Lawrence observed everything from the balcony, where he usually had his breakfast. Following medical recommendations, he had completely changed his lifestyle. He'd stepped down as president of the company, leaving Theodore in charge, keeping only advisory role that didn't require as much stress. "Dad!" Lily's voice called him from the kitchen. He still got emotional every time she called him that. It had started naturally, a few months after the trial. "What is it, little one? Come taste the muffins." I made them the way you like, without too much sugar because of your heart. He entered, finding the kitchen in an organized chaos that only Lily and Elena could create. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla filled the air, mixing with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He tasted a still warm muffin. It's perfect. You're getting better than Grandma Elena. Ay, tampoco exageres. Elena laughed, feigning indignation, but her face shone with pride. Ms. Harrison entered the kitchen carrying more decorations. The first guest should arrive in an hour. Lily, do you want to start getting ready? Just one more muffin. The girl negotiated, making everyone laugh. Her healthy appetite was one of the greatest victories. The days of fear and food deprivation were now just a distant memory. While Lily went upstairs to change, helped by Ms. Harrison, Lawrence, and Elena began to organize the kitchen. She's so different, the Salvadoran woman commented, her eyes misty. Anyone who sees her now would never imagine everything she went through. The scars are still there, Lawrence responded softly. But she's learning to live with them. We all are. The sound of the doorbell interrupted them. It was Theodore and Eleanor arriving early to help with the preparations. In recent months, the two had married in an intimate ceremony. Lily had been the flower girl, proudly scattering flower petals down the aisle. We brought something special, Eleanor announced, carrying a wrapped package. Can I open the presents? Now? They heard Lily's excited voice as she ran down the stairs in her new dress. This one is different, Theodore explained, his face more serious. It's something we thought you should have. Lily opened the package carefully, revealing a photo album. On the first pages were photos of her parents, some she had never seen before. How? Her voice faltered. We found them in one of the old files, Eleanor explained gently. They were photos that Sarah had kept, probably to use in their plan, but we thought they should return to you. Lily slowly flipped through the album, silent tears running down her face. There were photos of picnics, birthdays, everyday moments she barely remembered. Look, she pointed to a photo. That's Ms. Harrison with Mom. They're laughing. It was a mutual friend's wedding. Ms. Harrison approached, also emotional. Your mother had just found out she was pregnant with you. She was so happy. Lawrence observed the scene, feeling his heart, now stronger, healthier, filled with love and gratitude. In the last few months, they had built something precious, a family that, although unconventional, was more genuine than many bound by blood. The doorbell rang again. It was the first party guests, Lily's school friends, some neighbors, families they had met during the past year. The house soon filled with laughter and conversation. Among the guests were also some of the families, of the other children, those who had been victims of Sarah and Rick. Initially, it had been difficult for everyone, but over time they discovered that sharing the pain made the burden easier to bear. Look who's here, Ms. Harrison called from the door. It was the substitute teacher who had taken over Lily's class while Ms. Harrison handled the adoption process. She brought not only a gift, but special news. The project you suggested, she said excitedly, has been approved. We're going to implement therapeutic cooking classes in all the schools in the district. It was an idea born from Lily's own experience, how the act of cooking had helped in her recovery. Now, other children who had experienced trauma would have the same opportunity. The party continued, full of special moments. Lily blew out the candles on the cake she had helped make, making a wish with her eyes tightly closed. Then she proudly distributed the treats she had prepared with Elena. As evening began to fall, the guests started to leave. Only the closest family remained, Ms. Harrison, Eleanor, Theodore, Eleanor, and of course Lawrence. It was the best birthday of my life, Lily declared, sitting on the sofa between Lawrence and Ms. Harrison. Really? Ms. Harrison smiled. Better than last year's? Much better, because now I'm sure it's forever. You won't leave, right? Never, Lawrence promised, hugging her. We're a family now, forever. Later, when Lily was already asleep and the others had gone home, Lawrence stood on the balcony looking at the stars. He thought about Olivia, his sister, who never had the chance to grow up. He thought about the other children whose lives had been stolen by Sarah and Rick's cruelty. But mostly he thought about Lily, how she had survived, how she was learning to be a child again, how her smile illuminated every place she went. "Dad," the sleepy voice called him from the balcony door. "I couldn't sleep. Want to stay here with me for a while?" She nodded, snuggling up beside him. They remained silent for a moment, observing the illuminated city below. "Do you know what I wished for?" she suddenly asked. "I thought you couldn't tell, or it wouldn't come true." "This one you can," she smiled. "I wish that all the children in the world would have a family that truly loved them, just like you all love me." Lawrence felt tears come to his eyes. "That's a beautiful wish, little one. We could help, right? There are so many children needing love." He smiled, thinking about how she always worried about others, even after everything she had been through. "Yes, we can," he replied. "In fact, we're already helping. Every time you smile, every time you show that it's possible to overcome bad things, you're giving hope to other people." Lily yawned, her eyes beginning to grow heavy. "Dad? Yes? I love you. I love you too, little one. More than anything in the world." When she finally fell asleep in his arms, Lawrence remained on the balcony a while longer. He thought about how surprising life was, how from so much suffering could be born so much love, how the most painful losses sometimes led us to the most precious encounters. In the sky, a star shone brighter. He smiled, imagining that perhaps it was Olivia, finally at peace, knowing that her brother had managed to make a difference in another child's life. The gentle night breeze carried promises of many more happy days. Days of love, healing, and family. Days that Lily deserved. To live fully, being simply what she was, a loved child. And that, in the end, was the greatest miracle of all.